This 5-color deck wants to win games by utilizing a powerful suite of loyalty abilities. There are numerous support cards in the 99 that assist with and expedite this dynamic. We have various ways to get Planeswalkers into our hand as well as into play. We also can buff their loyalty peripherally for the purposes of activating their ultimate abilities way ahead of curve. Our Planeswalkers' other abilities allow us to interact with our opponents and advance our board state and resources, all the while as we plot each opponent's demise through an assembly of assorted Planeswalkers. Esika, God of the Tree, debuted in Kaldheim and is a 1/4 god with Vigilance that can tap to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool and has a mana value of 1 and 2 green mana. Esika gives other legendary creatures we control Vigilance and the ability to tap to add 1 mana of any color. Although these abilities are powerful, it is the backside of Esika that we plan to feature as the true general of this deck. The Prismatic Bridge is an enchantment for WUBRG mana, and at the beginning of our upkeep, we reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal a creature or a Planeswalker card. We put that card onto the battlefield, and the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. It is this cheat-and-to-play ability that makes the Prismatic Bridge so valuable, and it is the reason for its selection as the commander for this build. This deck has been sculpted through a mantra of all things Planeswalker. So even if a creature is cheated into play by the Prismatic Bridge's ability, then that creature will almost always synergize with Planeswalkers in some way, shape, or form. This dynamic will lead us to one convincing victory after another over our opponents. We begin the 99 of this deck tech with some ways to get Planeswalkers into our hand and onto the battlefield. Call the Gatewatch is a thematic tutor, which has us search our library for a Planeswalker card, reveal it, and put it into our hand. Ignite the Beacon does the same, but instead of searching for 1 Spark Wielder, we search for 2, and we do so at instant speed. When Jiru with Eyes Open enters the battlefield, we may search our library for a Planeswalker card, reveal it, and put it into our hand. If a source would deal damage to a Planeswalker we control, then Jiru prevents 1 of that damage. No swarms of 1/1 creatures are going to harm our Planeswalkers with Jiru on our side of the battlefield. Urza Assembles the Titans is a saga with the read-ahead mechanic, which means that when it enters the battlefield, we choose a chapter and start with that many lore counters on it, 1, 2, or 3. We add a lore counter to this saga after our draw step, and skipped chapters do not trigger. Chapter 1 has a Scry 4, and then we may reveal the top card of our library. If a Planeswalker card is revealed this way, then we put it into our hand. Chapter 2 allows us the option of putting a Planeswalker card with mana value of 6 or less from our hand onto the battlefield. Chapter 3 lets us activate the loyalty abilities of Planeswalkers we control twice this turn, rather than only once. Once the 3rd lore counter is placed on this saga, it is sacrificed. The read-ahead mechanic provides powerful versatility for the purposes of choosing which chapter best fits our needs when this enchantment comes into play. For more library to the battlefield shenanigans, we have Deploy the Gatewatch and Genesis Wave. Deploy the Gatewatch has us look at the top 7 cards of our library. We put up to 2 Planeswalker cards from among them onto the battlefield, and we put the rest of these cards on the bottom of our library in a random order. Genesis Wave could flood our side of the battlefield with more than just Planeswalkers. For X and 3 green mana, we reveal the top X cards of our library, and we may put any number of permanent cards with mana values of X or less from among them onto the battlefield. We put all cards revealed this way that were not put onto the battlefield into our graveyard. The more mana we can pump into Genesis Wave, the better chances we have of optimizing the return on our investment. For some graveyard to the battlefield shenanigans, we have Confront the Past and Eerie Ultimatum. Confront the Past provides two options from which to choose. Either we return target Planeswalker card with mana value X or less from our graveyard to the battlefield, or we remove twice X loyalty counters from target Planeswalker an opponent controls. Most likely, we will choose to recur a Spark Wielder. Eerie Ultimatum is going to recur a lot more than just a solitary Planeswalker. We return any number of permanent cards with different names from our graveyard right to the battlefield. We want to put loyalty counters onto our Planeswalkers as quickly as possible for the purposes of activating their ultimate abilities way ahead of curve. We have a slew of support cards that assist us with this goal. If we would put one or more counters on a creature or a Planeswalker we control, or on ourselves, Lae'zel, Vlaakith's Champion, adds one of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. Planeswalker's loyalty abilities we activate cost an additional +1 to activate with Karth the Lion. As a thematic bonus, whenever he enters the battlefield or whenever a Planeswalker we control dies, we look at the top 7 cards of our library. We may reveal a Planeswalker card from among them and put it into our hand. We put the rest of the cards on the bottom of our library in a random order. Karth puts additional loyalty counters onto our Planeswalkers and additional cards into our hand. Whenever an opponent attacks one or more Planeswalkers we control, Mila, Crafty Companion, puts a loyalty counter on each Planeswalker we control. Whenever a permanent we control becomes a target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, we draw a card. Mila provides multiple layers of protection for our Planeswalkers, either through the global dispersal of loyalty counters among Planeswalkers when they are attacked, or through a card-drawing ability when they are targeted. For additional versatility, we could choose to cast the backside of this card instead and put Luca, Wayward Bonder, into play. Luca provides a Rummage Plus ability, a temporary creature recursion ability, and an emblem that mimics Warstorm Surge, as whenever a creature we control enters the battlefield, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. At the beginning of our end step, Atraxa, Praetor's Voice, proliferates, which means we choose any number of permanents and or players, then give them each another counter of each kind already there. So, of course, Atraxa proliferates the loyalty counters on our Planeswalkers. This Phyrexian Angel Horror also is a 4/4 with Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, and Lifelink, which makes her a stalwart combat presence whose impact can be game-ending. We can pay 4 and tap the Chain Veil, and for each Planeswalker we control, we may activate one of its loyalty abilities once this turn, as though none of its loyalty abilities have been activated this turn. Note that this does not change when we can activate loyalty abilities. It merely provides the option of activating an ability of a Planeswalker a second time, which could add or subtract more counters onto that Planeswalker. At the beginning of our end step, if we did not activate a loyalty ability of a Planeswalker this turn, we lose 2 life. Iker Moon Gauntlet gives Planeswalkers we control 2 additional loyalty abilities. For 0 loyalty, we proliferate, which, for the purposes of this build, will add 1 loyalty counter to each Planeswalker we control. For -12 loyalty, we take an extra turn after this one. This artifact also has a confined proliferate-like ability, as whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we choose a counter on target permanent, and then put an additional counter of that kind on that permanent. With enough Spark Wielders on our side of the battlefield, we can proliferate an extra turn our way to taking every turn for the rest of the game. When Deep Glow Skate enters the battlefield, we double the number of each kind of counter on any number of target permanents. Of course, for us in this build, this fish will double all of our Planeswalkers' loyalty counters, which easily could lead to a round of good games thereafter. Doubling Season doubles the number of counters we put on permanents we control, and doubles the number of tokens we create under our control as well. Note that with Doubling Season, our Planeswalkers will enter the battlefield with double the number of their starting loyalty counters, but if we activate an ability whose cost has us put loyalty counters onto a Planeswalker, the number of counters we put onto that Planeswalker is not doubled. Remember, loyalty counters are put onto Planeswalkers as a cost, not an effect. An effect happens when their loyalty abilities resolve, like creating creature tokens, which Doubling Season will double. Even with this limitation, Doubling Season's presence on the battlefield is too valuable not to include in Planeswalker decks. To get a loyalty counter doubling ability when we activate our Planeswalker's loyalty abilities, we have Vorinclex Monstrous Raider. If we would put one or more counters onto a permanent or a player, we put twice that many of each of those kinds of counters onto that permanent or player instead. Through Vorinclex's wording, each loyalty ability we activate that adds loyalty counters will be doubled. Vorinclex also halves the number of counters our opponents put onto permanents or players, rounded down. There are hundreds of Planeswalkers from which to choose. So how do we decide which Planeswalkers are right for a Planeswalker-focused deck? Well, for this build, we followed a set of particular guidelines for the purposes of maximizing the effectiveness and impact of our Planeswalkers. Through the presence of numerous ways to accelerate the process of putting loyalty counters onto our Planeswalkers, including multiple ways to outright double these loyalty counters, each Planeswalker's starting loyalty had to be at least half of the loyalty needed to execute their ultimate Big Bang ability. If a Planeswalker enters the battlefield while either Doubling Season or Vorinclex Monstrous Raider is also on our side of the battlefield, then its starting loyalty would double, and this double starting loyalty should at least equal its ultimate loyalty ability. Next, these Planeswalkers then were prioritized secondary to the impact of these ultimate Big Bang abilities. Some of these abilities can win games, while others can severely hinder our opponent's chances at winning, and in the aforementioned scenario, we can activate them when they come into play. Planeswalkers then were prioritized secondary to their ability to provide us resources, such as card advantage and creature tokens. A steady stream of cards allows us to gain and maintain tempo over our opponents, while creating creature tokens helps protect our Planeswalkers, in addition to providing an alternate path to victory. Planeswalkers then were prioritized secondary to their ability to disrupt our opponent's resources and board states, with the majority of this build dedicated to Planeswalkers and Planeswalker synergies. Utilizing some abilities of our Planeswalkers lets us manage the battlefield more effectively and efficiently as we grind our way to victory after victory. With these guidelines in mind, there are 20 Planeswalkers in this deck. We already showcased Luca Wayward Bonder, which is the backside of Mila Crafty Companion. That leaves 19 other Spark Wielders, and here they are grouped together based on their ultimate loyalty abilities. Nicole Bolas Planeswalker has an ultimate ability that deals 7 damage to target player or Planeswalker. That player or that Planeswalker's controller also discards 7 cards and sacrifices 7 permanents. Although this ability does not impact each opponent by itself, its capacity to hamper one opponent's ability to compete in a game is powerful enough to warrant its inclusion into this build. This OG version of Nicole Bolas as a Planeswalker also can destroy target non-creature permanent or gain control of target creature. Vraska Relic Seeker has an ultimate ability that makes target player's life total become 1. Granted, this ability only targets one player and also does not knock that player out of the game. However, operating with just 1 life puts a player in a very unenviable and delicate position, and that is all thanks to Vraska. She also has loyalty abilities that creates creature tokens or destroys target artifact, creature, or enchantment, while also creating a treasure token for us. Chandra, Torch of Defiance, creates an emblem with, whenever we cast a spell, this emblem deals 5 damage to any target. Adding a direct damage component to a Planeswalker deck helps to manage the battlefield and offers an alternate win condition. Chandra also provides card advantage or additional direct damage to each opponent, mana acceleration, and potential creature removal. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, creates an emblem with, whenever we draw a card, we exile target permanent an opponent controls. Note that this emblem targets a permanent an opponent controls and not a non-land permanent. With the various card drawing effects inundating the 99 of this build, we should be able to deplete our opponent's mana resources rather quickly with this emblem. This version of Teferi also provides card draw and mana ramp, in addition to a tuck ability that places target non-land permanent into its owner's library, third from the top. Johnny Steadfast creates an emblem with, if a source would deal damage to us or a planeswalker we control, prevent all but one of that damage. If our opponents only can deal 1 point of damage at a time to us and our planeswalkers, then they're going to be in for a very, very long game. Johnny also can temporarily buff a creature by giving it +1/+1, first strike, vigilance, and lifelink until end of turn. And he can put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control, and a loyalty counter on each planeswalker we control as well. Jace, Unraveler of Secrets, creates an emblem with, whenever an opponent casts their first spell each turn, counter that spell. This source of counter magic is obscene, as each opponent literally sacrifices their first spell cast each turn for the purposes of attempting to cast additional spells thereafter. Jace's other abilities include drawing cards and returning target creature to its owner's hand. Note that this ability does not have to target an opponent's creature. It could target one of ours, and it is a great way to get Deep Glow Skate back into our hand in order to recast it. Narset Transcendent creates an emblem with, your opponents cannot cast non-creature spells. If any of our opponents are touting spell slinger builds at the table, then they are going to be sorely disappointed with this potentially back-breaking emblem. At a minimum, this shuts down nearly all of our opponents' ways to interact with our planeswalkers aside from combat. Narset's other abilities include potential card advantage and instant or sorcery spell rebounding. Nicol Bolas, God Pharaoh, has an ultimate ability that exiles each non-land permanent our opponents control. Although this ability does not guarantee a win, it leaves our opponent's sides of the battlefield so barren that gaining a victory is simply a matter of time. Among this version of Nicol Bolas's other 3 abilities include card advantage, resource depletion for our opponents, and direct damage to target opponent, creature an opponent controls, or planeswalker an opponent controls instead. Liliana, Dreadhorde General, has an ultimate ability that has each opponent choose a permanent they control of each permanent type, and then sacrifices the rest. This ability does not outright win us the game, but it cripples our opponent's sides of the battlefield to the extent that victory is only a matter of time. This version of Liliana also has a static ability that draws us a card whenever a creature we control dies, in addition to creating creature tokens and globally removing creatures from the battlefield. Garruk, Cursed Huntsman, creates an emblem with, creatures we control get +3/+3 and have trample. This is a static overrun effect. With a decent-sized number of creature tokens on our side of the battlefield, this emblem could spell certain doom for our opponents. Garruk also can create creature tokens that put loyalty counters on each Garruk we control when they die, as well as destroy target creature and draw a card. Elspeth, Sun's Champion, creates an emblem with, creatures we control get +2/+2 and flying. This emblem follows suit with Garruk, Cursed Huntsman by making our creature tokens much more threatening. Remember, there are numerous planeswalker abilities that create creature tokens in this build, and Elspeth's emblem provides boosts to their power and toughness, in addition to giving them evasion. As for her other abilities, Elspeth herself can create creature tokens, and she can destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater. Sorin, Grim Nemesis, creates a number of 1/1 black Vampire Knight creature tokens with lifelink equal to the highest life total among all players. Creating a massive army of vampires should allow us to win the game through combat, particularly if there are any peripheral power-boosting effects on our side of the battlefield. Sorin's other abilities provide card advantage and potential life drain, in addition to dealing X direct damage to target creature or planeswalker and gaining X life. Tibalt, Cosmic Imposter, is actually the backside of Valki, God of Lies. As Tibalt enters the battlefield, we get an emblem with we may play cards exiled with Tibalt, and we may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast these spells. Note that this is not Tibalt's ultimate ability. This is an enter the battlefield trigger. Tibalt's ultimate ability exiles all cards in all graveyards and then adds 3 red mana to our mana pool. His other abilities include exiling the top card of each player's library and exiling target artifact or creature. It's all about exiling cards with Tibalt. If we choose to cast the Valki side of this card, then when Valki enters the battlefield, each opponent reveals their hand. For each opponent, we exile a creature card they revealed this way until Valki leaves the battlefield. We may pay X and choose a creature card with mana value X that was exiled with Valki. Valki becomes a copy of that card. Both Tibalt or Valki are great options for this type of build. Kaya the Inexorable creates an emblem with, at the beginning of our upkeep, we may cast a legendary spell from our hand, from our graveyard, or from among cards we own in exile without paying its mana cost. Note that each Planeswalker is a legendary spell, and we will cast one of them for free at the beginning of each of our upkeeps. Kaya's other abilities provide a form of creature recursion and token creation, in addition to exiling target non-land permanent. Tezzeret, Artifice Master, creates an emblem with, at the beginning of our end step, we search our library for a permanent card and put it onto the battlefield. Nearly 80% of the cards in this deck are permanent cards. We should have little difficulty in taking advantage of this emblem, particularly when considering the various counter-doubling permanents we have showcased already, such as Deep Glow Skate, Doubling Season, and Vorinclex Monstrous Raider. This version of Tezzeret also creates evasive creature tokens and provides card draw. Eugen the Spirit Dragon has an ultimate ability that gains us 7 life, draws us 7 cards, and then allows us to put up to 7 permanent cards from our hand onto the battlefield. This can completely tip the battlefield into our favor and could easily result in a round of good games upon its resolution. Eugen's other abilities include dealing 3 damage to any target, as well as a mass exile effect for any permanents on the battlefield that are 1 or more colors. Teferi, Temporal Archmage, creates an emblem with, we may activate loyalty abilities of planeswalkers we control on any player's turn, and at any time we can cast an instant. When paired with an activation from the aforementioned Chain Veil, we can activate the loyalty abilities of planeswalkers we control twice this turn, and at any time we could cast an instant. Teferi version 1.0 also provides card advantage and can untap up to 4 target permanents, which can include the Chain Veil. Tamio, Field Researcher, has an ultimate ability that draws us 3 cards and creates an emblem with, we may cast spells from our hand without paying their mana costs. This omniscience effect should completely overwhelm our opponents, particularly if we are benefiting from continuous streams of card advantage abilities from our planeswalkers. Tamio also provides potential card draw, in addition to the ability to tap down 2 different target permanents. They do not untap during their controller's next untap step. Nicol Bolas, Dragon God, has an ultimate ability that has each opponent who does not control a legendary creature or planeswalker lose the game. No legendary creature, no planeswalker, no chance at winning. They lose just like that. This version of Nicol Bolas also has a static ability that gives him all loyalty abilities of all other Planeswalkers on the battlefield. As if these abilities were not enough, the Dragon God here also provides card advantage, resource depletion for our opponents, in addition to destroying target creature or Planeswalker. We have a slew of miscellaneous spells to showcase here, including the two best tutors in the game, Demonic Tutor and Vampiric Tutor. Demonic Tutor puts any card from our library into our hand at sorcery speed, while Vampiric Tutor puts any card from our library on top of our shuffled library at instant speed, and we also lose 2 life. There are a few Planeswalker-specific enchantments in the 99 in the form of Oaths. Oath of Nissa allows us to spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast Planeswalker spells, and when it enters the battlefield, we look at the top 3 cards of our library. We may reveal a creature, land, or Planeswalker card from among them and put it into our hand. We put the rest of these cards on the bottom of our library in any order. When Oath of Liliana enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a creature. At the beginning of each end step, if a Planeswalker entered the battlefield under our control this turn, we create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Oath of Teferi allows us to activate the loyalty abilities of Planeswalkers we control twice each turn rather than only once, and when it enters the battlefield, we exile target permanent we control, and then we return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Whenever we activate an ability, as long as it is not a mana ability, then Rings of Brighthearth allows us the option of paying 2 mana. If we do, then we copy that ability, and we may choose new targets for the copy. For the purposes of this build, we can use the rings to copy the loyalty abilities of our Planeswalkers. But note, adding or subtracting loyalty counters from a Planeswalker is part of the cost to use that ability, and a Planeswalker will not get more or lose more loyalty counters when their abilities are copied by Rings of Brighthearth. We may have Spark Double enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature or Planeswalker we control, except it enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it if it's a creature, it enters with an additional loyalty counter on it if it's a Planeswalker, and it is not legendary. This illusion lets us double up on one of our Planeswalkers when it comes into play. Finding ways to protect our Planeswalkers is paramount, and Bitter Blossom is a great way to do so. At the beginning of our upkeep, we lose 1 life and we create a 1/1 black Fairy Rogue creature token with flying. These evasive tokens act as perfect chump blockers for the purposes of preserving our Planeswalkers' presence on the battlefield. Semester's End has us exile any number of target creatures and or Planeswalkers we control. At the beginning of the next end step, we return each of them to the battlefield under their owner's control. Each of them enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it if it's a creature, and an additional loyalty counter on it if it's a Planeswalker. Note the synergies present here among our meticulously selected Planeswalkers, Semester's End, and Doubling Season, Vorinclex Monstrous Raider, and Deep Glow Skate. With either Doubling Season or Vorinclex in play, the return from exile Planeswalker's starting loyalty doubles. If Deep Glow Skate is on the battlefield, it can be exiled alongside our Planeswalkers, and when they all return to play, Deep Glow Skate doubles the starting loyalty of each Planeswalker that entered the battlefield with it. Semester's End is more than just a layer of protection for our Planeswalkers, it can be a win condition as well. All permanents we control phase out when we cast Teferi's Protection. Until our next turn, our life total cannot change, and we gain protection from everything. This spell is a perfect way to ensure that we have one last turn to activate our Planeswalker's abilities as we close in on victory. Speaking of closing in on victory, All Will Be One is an alternate win condition here. Whenever we put one or more counters on a permanent or player, all will be one deals that much damage to target opponent, target creature an opponent controls, or target planeswalker an opponent controls. This enchantment triggers whenever a planeswalker enters the battlefield under our control, and whenever we add loyalty counters to our planeswalkers. This direct damage delivery system can get out of hand very, very quickly. Managing the battlefield and neutralizing threats to our planeswalkers help to ensure their longevity on the battlefield. And since we are playing 5 colors, we have all of Magic's best removal and disruption spells at our disposal. Beginning with targeting creatures, we have Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile. These gold standards of creature removal are both instants that cost 1 white mana to cast, and they both exile target creature. The controllers of these creatures respectively gain life equal to the exiled creature's power, or may search their library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. We have numerous spot removal spells that can target more than just creatures. Assassin's Trophy destroys target permanent an opponent controls. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card and put it into play. Both Beast Within and Generous Gift destroy target permanent, and the controllers of these destroyed permanents respectively create either a 3/3 green beast or a 3/3 green elephant creature token. Anguished Unmaking exiles target non-land permanent, and we lose 3 life in the process. Creative mass removal spells help to maintain our planeswalker's presence on the battlefield even further. Simple spells that destroy all creatures, or deals X damage to each creature, are not as effective due to the popularity of indestructible and other forms of protection. With that in mind, we selected spells that manage these inevitabilities. As an additional cost to cast Toxic Deluge, we pay X life. Each creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. Evacuation returns all creatures to their owner's hands at instant speed, while Terminus puts all creatures on the bottom of their owner's libraries. Note that through its miracle mechanic, we could cast Terminus for just 1 white mana. If it's the first card we drew this turn, of course. If we pay the overload cost for Cyclonic Rift, then we return each non-land permanent we don't control to their owner's hands. We have a mix of both mana ramp spells and mana rocks. Both 3 Visits and Nature's Lore allow us to search our library for a forest card and put it onto the battlefield, while Farseek lets us search our library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. As mana rocks go, we have Mana Crypt, Mox Amber, Soul Ring, and Arcane Signet. Both Mana Crypt and Soul Ring tap to add 2 colorless mana to our mana pool, but we must exercise caution secondary to Mana Crypt's potential damage-dealing upkeep trigger. We do not want to be the player to lose the game to their own Mana Crypt. If our life total depends on it, it is reasonable to destroy our own Mana Crypt. Mox Amber taps to add 1 mana of any color among legendary creatures or planeswalkers we control, while Arcane Signet taps to add 1 mana of any color in this build. The land base of this build is balanced and singleton, meaning that there are no duplicate lands in the deck. We have 1 basic land of each land type. We also have the 10 Shock Lands. These lands enter the battlefield tapped unless we pay 2 life, have 2 different land types, and tap to add 1 of 2 different colors of mana to our mana pool. We also have the 5 Triomes from Ikoria, Lair of Behemoths. These lands enter the battlefield tapped, have 3 different land types, and tap to add 1 of 3 different colors of mana to our mana pool. As an option, we can cycle these lands away from our hand for 3 generic mana and draw a card. Next are the 10 Fetch Lands. We can tap these lands, pay 1 life, and sacrifice them to search our library for a land with 1 of 2 different basic land types and put them onto the battlefield. Note that these Fetch Lands can put our basic lands, Shock Lands, and Triomes into play from our library. We have a couple of other color-fixing lands as well. Command Tower taps to add 1 mana of any color in this build, while Reflecting Pool should be able to do the same. Closing out the land portion of this video and bringing this deck tech to a close are a few utility lands. We can pay 1 and tap Nesting Grounds to move a counter from target permanent we control onto another target permanent, but we can only activate this ability as a sorcery. With Nesting Grounds, we can move a loyalty counter from one Planeswalker to another, which could mean the difference between activating an ultimate ability or waiting until next turn to do so. We can pay 4 mana and tap Karn's Bastion to proliferate. We can activate this ability at instant speed and is a versatile way to put loyalty counters onto our Planeswalkers. And lastly, as card number 99 in this deck tech, and a benefit for crafting a singleton land base, is Field of the Dead. Whenever it or another land enters the battlefield under our control, if we control at least 7 lands with different names, then we create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Through this dynamic, we can protect our Planeswalkers through a fundamental aspect of playing Magic the Gathering: playing lands. This Esika God of the Tree Prismatic Bridge build has been added to the Burgeoning Commander Catalog, and this video also becomes the starting point of an Esika God of the Tree Prismatic Bridge EDH deck video primer series. These playlist series can be accessed in the description below on our YouTube page or at the end of this video. The Burgeoning Commander Catalog is my personal collection of EDH decks. An EDH deck video primer series showcases the continued evolution of a deck through future appearances on the Up and Up series, during which we update and upgrade decks featured on this channel. The full card list for this build can be found in the description, and be sure to share your thoughts about this Esika God of the Tree, the Prismatic Bridge deck, in the comments section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, a channel for all things magic.